Hi everybody, I'm live tonight with Dr. Laura Lenihan. I'm going to add her now, so bear with me as we add Laura. Great. I think Laura is there. Wonderful. The technology is always what gets me.
It is. Sorry.
All right. Well, as everybody is coming on there, I want to welcome everybody. You okay, Laura?
Yeah, it's not connected to my things, but hopefully the sound seems okay. Can you hear me okay, Eva?
Absolutely. And I actually gave up on mine this evening as well for fear. So good evening, everybody. You're very welcome to our virtual VHI Women's Mini Marathon event tonight with myself, Aoife Hearn, registered dietitian, and Dr. Laura Lenihan, the virtual Women's Mini Marathon ambassador, who I know has been training very hard over the last 9 weeks for the 10K walk. And not long left now. It's only 3 weeks out till that all-important date of the 19th of September. So I'm sure everyone is very busy trying to finish up all that preparation and enjoy the event. I'm delighted to be the nutrition expert this year for the VHI Virtual Women's Mini Marathon. And tonight, myself and Laura wanted to really just talk about how you can prepare for this race. Or walk, or whatever way you want to do it, from a nutrition perspective, but also, I suppose, for people who have really busy lives, both family lives and work life. And for me, always, it's about trying to have a view of how we can maintain some of these habits going into the future, because I think that really is the most important thing when it comes to eating, to be honest. So how we can maintain some of these good habits. It's easy when we have something to focus on, and sometimes gets a little bit harder when that goes. So really, we want to hear from you. So any questions? I know we've had some questions come in already, but any questions, feel free to send them up and we'll get through as many as we possibly can tonight. So Laura, how are you doing? How's your training been going?
Yeah, it's going good. It's hard with kids trying to fit it in. You know, that's what I struggle with. I struggle with it on the training side, also the eating side, the healthy eating side. But yeah, no, it's been going good. It's been nice, you know, to do something and have something to work towards. And I've tried like that, like no more than with eating, I suppose, with everything, Aoife. You know, when you're training for something, it's easy to do it, and it's all about maintaining those habits afterwards. So the same with the exercise. So started trying to do a little bit of personal training along the side as well to just keep it going. Yeah.
Brilliant. And it is, and because whatever about the eating, like you have to eat, you know, but the exercise, like I find personally, is one of the things that I let slide because I don't always need it to survive, you know, and it is a personal struggle for me to try and maintain that, you know. So yeah, it's not easy. And I suppose, you know, I think the main message people should always get is no one is getting it all. When you have a young family and when you're trying to work, like you can't do it all at the one time. And expectations have to be very low. That is what I've learned. A low bar. That's where I'm at.
Exactly. Yeah, 100%. And be okay with that. You know, allow yourself that. Like, I think, because you see, you know, I see patients, or we see people who put a lot of pressure on themselves to do a lot of different things, and really just sometimes you need to let go as well. It's okay to, you know, just do what you can do.
Well, good enough is good enough, you know, and I think that, and when it comes to your eating and with your exercise as well. So we have a few questions. I think we'll start off with maybe some of the questions have already come in. So if anyone else has any questions, feel free to throw them up there and we'll get them answered. One question I think that kind of came up a lot, Laura, and you've probably experienced with this, is around hydration. So what should people drink before? What should people drink during? What should people drink after, like training and an event? And what kind of things have you been doing?
Well, for me, I suppose I'm doing the walking side of things. So I've been drinking water, like is the most important for me. I'm not a massive fan personally of electrolyte drinks or anything like that. And I think they become more, well, you can tell us that, like if they become more important the longer you do. But for me, hydration wise, tons of water. And I'm a big water drinker always. And, you know, like it's so good for a healthy body in general, you know. So as a GP, obviously I have to be. So yeah, lots and lots of water.
And I know you do a lot of work with dermatology, with skin, and again, you know, like water is
Healthy
so
skin,
important.
yeah, absolutely. Like keeping your hydration levels up, you know, it's so important. Yeah.
And, you know, what I would say absolutely for walking, you know, water is probably sufficient. As people are potentially training a little bit more intensely and at much higher levels, electrolyte drinks and even potentially sports drinks can play a role. But I think ultimately water needs to be the mainstay. And then, you know, when it's a really hot, you know, if it's a very hot day, for example, or a very long event, over an hour, we kind of generally say that potentially that's when the use of sports drinks or electrolyte drinks can become, you know, important, I suppose.
Yeah. So as you're sweating them out and everything.
Yes.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And the other thing I would say, though, what I find people maybe sometimes forget or don't even think about is using them before an event. Never try something new on the day, because I've had so many people who've done that and then come to me and say, oh, I've had a really bad stitch or a really bad cramp and I felt really sick. So again, you know, it is important, whatever you're going to try, whatever you want to do on the day, make sure you've tried it before, you know.
I think, and that probably fits in really well with the training schedule that David is doing, you know, so you're working your way up, you're working, like I'm working my way from 6, 7, 8 kilometers. So if I plan on doing something on the day, I should do it on those for everyone else as well. Yeah, that's a really good idea, actually, and not one that you necessarily think of, right? Because not everyone will be running the 10K before they do it on the day. So to practice it, and I think to think about, even from a practical point of view, how you're going to do that on the day as well, because it's not the same as, you know, because it's virtual this year. So to think about that, I'm gonna have family stationed around the place with my water bottle.
Yes. And actually that's a really good point, because, you know, depending on how long it's going to take, you know, you need fluids really, you know, every maybe half an hour, every 20 minutes to half an hour. So again, you know, it is good if you have people around who can kind of be your water stations. That is a really good idea, you know. And I think then the other place that maybe people sometimes forget about then is the recovery, and what kind of drinks to drink after, because what we really don't want people doing right after, especially if they're running, you know, the mini marathon, is maybe to drink a whole lot of water right after the event, you know. So I suppose that's where we're looking at things maybe that are a little bit higher in sugar, you know, going to help with that recovery. Even things like chocolate milk, for example. Your electrolyte drinks can potentially work really good there as well, you know. So those kind of things can actually work good, and especially maybe as training is increasing, you know, if you're going out for a walk, probably not necessary, but if you're, you know, going to those higher intensities, potentially that's going to become more of a role there, you know.
Absolutely. Really good point.
And we've got one question here from Una asking about healthy snacks between meals. So what about you, Laura? What kind of things do you have between meals? No judgment.
Do you know, I actually don't really snack. I'm not a snacker. Like, I'm a bit of a fussy eater, so I don't really, I certainly don't like any healthy snacks. So I don't snack. Like, no, I don't really snack. I eat my meals, you know. I mean, I treat myself to something bold in the evening every now and then, but like, I don't really snack. I won't lie.
And I'm like the opposite. If I don't have food like every 2 hours, don't be near me, because it is a bad idea. So, you know, and I suppose what I would say for snacks, like, we are trying to get people to eat more fruit and vegetables in general, and fruit is always a great snack. Comes in its own package. Things like bananas are really handy, apples, and even, you know, you can make your own maybe cereal bars with oats and things, you know. So there are lots of different things that can work. I suppose when we think about our snacks, what we want maybe is to have some kind of whole grain or high fiber carbohydrate. So you could have things like your fruit, you could have whole grain crackers, you know. It kind of depends on your age and how much exercise you're doing to what kind of snacks would work, right?
Absolutely.
But I generally would say to people, never ignore your hunger, you know. So eat a little bit even ahead of your hunger, because if it gets to that place where you're absolutely ravenous, it is, you know, well, it's lights out for me anyway. If there's M&Ms around, you may forget it.
That's probably what I do wrong, to be honest. I wouldn't snack though. If I got hungry, I'd just wait, and then I love that, went into McDonald's and had a burger and milk while doing the NYC marathon. I would just eat dinner a bit earlier, probably eat more at dinner, which isn't the way to do it, but rather than snack.
Well, you know? And you know, I think everything works different for everybody, isn't it? You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like, some people will snack, some people don't. I think what I sometimes see is people ignoring their hunger, not eating, and then getting to a meal and like totally overeating more than they even really needed. So I think the main thing when it comes to snacks is think about a whole grain carbohydrate. If you can get some protein with it, it will fill you better. And think, a lot like plant-based foods, so things like our fruit, even raw veggies and hummus, for example, another really good snack. So but yeah, that is so funny about that guy. Is it having a McDonald's? But that is,
I love that. That would be me. Carb loading through it, great.
I think we had another question there. Oh yeah, so someone's asking, important not to drink too much water after run. Oh yeah, so what I was saying there, Jenna, is drinking too much water on its own right after a run can put extra pressure potentially on your heart, like if you're downing a litre or two, right? So we don't necessarily want water in isolation, especially if you've sweat a lot. So if it's a walk, it's not that big a deal, but if there's been a lot of sweating and you've lost a lot of salt in that sweat and you dump in a whole lot of water without salt, that's not necessarily a place that we want people to be. So again, that's potentially, and where electrolyte drinks and sports drinks come in handy. But again, what I would say, especially after a race, often you're really thirsty and the temptation is to drink really quickly, isn't it? So even try to sip it if you can and slow down a little bit with that intake. I think it's probably a good idea.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's, probably not something that a lot of people know. I mean, I'm thinking back now to medical school and learning all that hyperbiliemia and lower electrolytes and all that kind of crack that I haven't thought about it in quite some time. So that's probably something that people don't know really, and that's worth knowing. And it's why it's important to think about these things when you're doing events like this as well, isn't it? To think about the nutrition side of things as well. It's so important.
And like, I think, you train for the event, so you kind of, your food, you have to train with your food as well. And just because something works well for, I don't know, I don't even remember the best marathon runners at the moment, maybe someone like Aoife Cook, who ran in Tokyo for Ireland. But just because something might work well for one person doesn't necessarily it's going to work for you. So, trial and error with your training, I think, is important as well. That's something I kind of like people to trust themselves. Actually, I think it kind of almost comes back to your hunger and fullness. Trust what works for you. Is key too.
Yeah, agree completely. It's the same with most things in medicine, to be totally honest, including skincare. I get that at the end of every consultation. So yeah, very true.
Yeah, and I think, and it's probably off a little bit, but I sometimes think, we're not always told to listen to our gut, to listen to ourselves. And I think it is something that, definitely as I've gotten older, I've probably started to pay attention a little bit more too as well, Yeah,
because we're all different at the end of the day, so these are strategies, there's guidelines, there's this and you don't have to fit a particular mold. It's okay to alter it slightly to work for you.
Yes. And like that, what I would say, tying in with that, consistency. Just be consistent with what you do. Don't jump from one thing to another thing because you're never going to necessarily see results there either. So really try to be consistent with what you do. And actually it can help again to even keep a food log, not as a way to punish yourself with your food, but even just to track, like, how did you feel after that run or walk or jog when you ate that food? And that can actually really give yourself a good personalized plan of what to eat,
Yeah.
So somebody else asked here, and this question has come up a lot, how long before you run or exercise should you be eating? Again, kind of comes back to yourself. And I've worked, so I've done a lot of work in sports nutrition, and I remember after there was one All-Ireland final, hurling final, and literally right before the match was about to start, one of our players wanted a banana. And I mean, that is not what we would normally want someone to have, something that's maybe high in fiber right before they start. But it was something that always worked for him. And I was like 8 months pregnant at the time with my first child. I was tearing back into the dressing room to find a banana for him. But yeah, so, again, what works for one person doesn't work for another. But what I would say in general, it takes about 3 to 4 hours for a large meal to digest and maybe an hour to 2 for a snack. So, what I would say is you don't want to be eating your dinner at 5 o'clock and going out for a run at 5:30. But likewise, you don't necessarily want your lunch at 1 o'clock and then going out to exercise at 7 o'clock without anything in between. So I think little and often is probably the best approach. thinking about having enough time, but also thinking what's making up your plate. So, you know, really you want maybe like a third to maybe a quarter of, or a half of that plate to be a carbohydrate source, so bread, potato, pasta, rice. You want the other maybe quarter to be a lean protein, so you know, grilled chicken, white fish, maybe even lean pork, and then you want another quarter to maybe up to a third of your vegetables. The biggie right before is that you don't necessarily want something that's very high in fat. That's going to take longer to digest, and so the blood is going to be trying to digest all that food in your gut when really you want it in your muscles trying to exercise. So that's definitely something, I suppose, that is a good idea. But think about the timing, think about what makes up those meals, and keep it lower in fat if you can. So avoiding deep fried things, meat and fat or things like that. So what else have we got, Laura? Have you seen any other questions?
What food to eat before runs? You've done that, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that was that one. And then I think missing the late look, I think definitely, you know, it's going to be different this year. I've never done the VHI women's mini marathon as a virtual event or as a non-virtual event before.
Yeah.
But I think you can have people cheering you on, you know, like, and tell people where you're going to, or walk past run past your friend's house, you know.
Yes.
And like, there's going to be such a big contingent on Instagram sharing their stories, you know. So I think it'll be different. Clearly, everything is different at the minute, but it'll be good. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so what else we got? What foods to eat for energy, finding it hard. So, you know, and this is, again, comes back to maybe eating enough. So often I think people maybe restrict a little bit too much. So making sure that there's enough food coming in, eating little and often, making sure you're well hydrated. The hydration is one of the most important pieces when it comes to energy as well. So I think little and often, eating enough, and don't ignore your hunger. Do not ever ignore your hunger. You'll be thinking about me, Laura, now every time you're hungry.
I know. I think that's, but you know the way I find little changes really work well for people. So if I'm giving advice from a medical point of view, like if as a GP or whatever, I'm always like, just pick something small and make that change first.
Yeah.
So I've got a new thing that I'm going to do. So when I'm hungry and then I'm late to eating my dinner, I'm going to try and restrict myself and just stick to the size that I know I eat and not take the second portion, which I know I shouldn't do anyway. But it's the little things. That's a little thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, for me, when it comes to the little things as well, and one of the things I've actually really helps me right now is cooking a second portion always. So I'm cooking an extra portion when I cook for the family, and tonight ended up in a total disaster. And I was very thankful there was enough spaghetti bolognese to feed the kids again tonight, you know. So, and again, if that wasn't there, it's so hard. And I mean, I'm just like anyone else. If I don't have enough in the house, or I don't have the right thing in the house, I end up going for takeaway as well, you know. So it's just trying to be one step ahead of yourself. I think the organization, preparation when it comes to eating is key. So making a meal plan, having a shopping list, getting the stuff in the house, you know, all those things make it easier.
Yeah, and like we spoke about that before, I'm a big fan of ways to make my life easier, because I have my full-time clinic, 3 small kids. Like, I like pre-chopped vegetables. You know, like if I buy fresh, they just always go off. So, you know, like pre-chopped peppers, carrots, butter squash, everything, onions. So I just whack them all into the pan from frozen. So there's way less cooking time. You know, so it's all, and I see there's a really good question there from Ellen about maintaining good habits. So it's all about getting used to those good habits, you know, and so even I was doing my skin before we did this.
Oh, yes.
My nighttime routine, even though a lot wouldn't and would, you know, leave their daytime routine. But my good habit for my skin is that I do it when I put the kids to bed, because if I don't do it at that time, I won't do it later on, because I'm always too tired, inevitably. And even when I'm not too tired, most of the time I just can't be bothered. So my good habit for my skin is to do it. So I was like, well, I'm not breaking my good habit now because I have this. I was like, I'll just look a little bit glowy on it because I'll have my serum just on. But it's all about sticking with those good habits. And incorporating them into your routine, and then kind of making them work for you. And again, So for, like, you probably find this with your patients as a GP, and I'm not the health expert in this now or anything, but just, so like, you know, it's all about making it work for you. So as much as I prescribe something, you know, that's great, but actually you have to go and make that work and fit into your life.
Yeah, oh no, 100%, 100%. And I think for me, if the trigger for me when it comes to eating well is if I don't make the meal plan and I don't get that shopping list done, forget it. I'm in and out of the supermarket all the time and I never seem to get what I actually really need. I spend a fortune on food. And it's never going to be like, you know, when I think about what I want a meal to look like, it's not going to really always meet that. So definitely the meal plan and the shopping list is the biggest thing for me. So, but I think you're right. Like building it into habits that you already have is important. You know? So like Saturday morning for us, the kids are getting ready for hurling and I normally kind of take it a bit easy, have a cup of coffee and get ready. And that's normally when I make the meal plan and I ask the kids what meals they want in the week. They may not always make it onto the list, but you know, I like to let them have some kind of control. But yeah, so that is, so yeah, fitting it into a time in your life that makes it easier, I think is important, you know.
Yeah, that's a good way to do it, actually, planning it on the Saturday as well, isn't it? And, you know, for me with the pre-cut veg, I think, and in like, you know, so we're living in a weird world right now. We're going back towards a bit of normality, but you know, there's lots of local companies here now that have adapted and that will deliver fresh fruit and vegetables to your door, pre-cut. So you can plan out your week, then you can just order some of it online and get it all to your right. You know, there's so many different options and so many healthy online you know, food delivery companies and different things like that to, you know, because for a busy household it can be difficult. So it's to find what works.
Yeah, and the vegetables that always lose out, you know, so like that buying pre-cut or buying frozen as well. So there's always something there, you know, always work. And I suppose just trying to somehow get, you know, those vegetables in your meals. And even I think as well, like sometimes, you know, if I have a roast chicken or a roast beef, I'll try and use that leftover chicken that's already cooked in the meal the next day or early in the week. So, you know, it just, again, it's cutting down on how much time you're cooking, isn't it? And really, you know, and I think, like you said this evening about your skin routine, it's so easy to fall out of these habits sometimes. But you really have to be really clear about why you're making those changes and why you want to do it and why it's important to you. And, you know, and not think about doing it forever. Just think about doing it the next day, the next meal, the next snack, whatever it is. But, you know, just to kind of keep on track. I think that's really key. Okay. Oh yeah, someone after the race is over. Oh yeah, that was that question about after the race is over. So I think one of the things I would say is also think about why you're doing it. You know, that's really, really important. All right.
There was a question there about what is the best kind of food for recovery that came in the question box.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I thought that was a good one.
Yeah, so again, you know, I suppose the whole world is anti-sugar at the moment, you know, but sugar actually has a really important function at times, and in recovery is one of them. So again, you know, sugar and protein work really well in a recovery phase. So chocolate milk can work well after really intense training, but even just regular milk, you know, in a bowl of like a cereal, for example, can work good also. We kind of like, though, to see that recovery happening soon after a high intensity event. So, you know, you don't want to leave it 2 hours before you eat if you're really focused on recovery and, you know, training well the next day, for example. So, you know, within kind of half an hour is where we want to replenish those carbohydrates. Protein is a little bit longer, but, you know, again, that combination can work really good. Yeah. So chocolate milk is a really big...
Chocolate milk, yeah, I wouldn't have guessed that at all. What about protein drinks?
Yeah. So like kind of recovery powder drinks, for example.
Yeah.
So I suppose the whey that's in those things comes from milk. So they can work, you know. I would say get a reputable brand is important. And sometimes, again, in the summer, they're more convenient than milk because you don't need like the milk to stay cold, you know. But they absolutely can work. But I think, again, as a dietitian, getting more milk in, more calcium, you know, double goal.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
What else? Oh, and somebody else said here, and this is really good, about bulk cooking. And I have to say 100%. Yeah, 100%. Really important. Cooking ahead, having things in your freezer. And even I've started just cooking an extra portion or two every day. I'm cooking now, and if we don't eat it, we freeze it. But more often than not, the life is so crazy, we always end up needing it the next day. So
Which
it
is
works.
good, isn't it? Yeah, yeah.
Okay, what else have we got? Yes, let me see.
There's
What
another
foods?
question. Yeah.
Sorry, you're going to say, yeah, what foods would you recommend are the best for protein if you don't eat meat? Okay, so again, loads of plant-based proteins that you can use. Tofu can work, beans, legumes can work, fish, if eating fish can work, and eggs as well, a brilliant source of protein and so easy. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner and eggs. I'm a big egg fan. So if you're eating those, they're all really good protein sources. The main thing, I suppose, when it comes to protein, we want things lean. We don't want things processed. You know, there's a big difference between maybe a chicken fillet or chicken from roast chicken, then chicken that's covered in breadcrumbs and maybe a little bit more processed. So, you know, even like just thinking about what's in it, what's been had to go into it to make what you're eating. So keep it as I suppose whole foods as possible, you know.
Yeah.
What else have we got, Laura?
I think that's, oh, geez, I've hit something.
Oh.
I think that's kind of all of them.
Oh yeah, there's one there, I think, about coconut milk. And
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
very popular, but it is high in saturated fat. And again, from a cholesterol point of view, not necessarily something we want to see people having as much, not as much protein as you're going to have in like regular cow's milk. And again, I think there's a bit of a backlash sometimes towards milk and our dairy products, but they really have such value and really great source of protein and calcium as well. So, you know, I don't think we need to avoid those foods to be healthy, just like sugar can fit in. As a chocoholic here, I always have to make some way to fit it in.
And if I'm looking back on the questions that were sent in.
Oh, great.
There was a question about what could I bring with me on my run that would be healthy but give me an energy boost if needed.
So lots of things. Again, sometimes people will use energy gels, but again,
little sachets, yeah.
And so you need to know you like it. Again, some of them can cause some GI upset, and we didn't have a whole lot of time to talk about that tonight, but tummy issues and jumping ditches during runs is very, very common. And so sometimes some of these different drinks, if they don't suit you, or the gels, if they're a little bit high in either caffeine or sugar, sometimes just don't work as well. But they can absolutely work well. Sometimes people will even use jelly beans again. So I suppose, you know, when we're thinking about during a run, hydration is key. That's the thing you always want to think about first. How long is it going to be? Is it going to be longer than an hour? If so, how am I going to get fluids in? And then after that, I suppose we're really thinking about carbohydrate sources. So sometimes, again, the sports drinks can work because they have sugar and electrolytes and water all packed into one. But sometimes people will use jelly beans. Again, we don't want anything high in fat. We want really simple sugars here to help kind of sustain exercise. Again, you know, caffeine is one of those things, again, that can be quite useful if you've practiced with it and are used to it, often in those gels. And we know caffeine makes your brain believe that what you're about to do isn't as hard as what you're about to do. So again, a very, very useful. As a mother of one little middle girl who did not sleep for 3 years, caffeine was absolutely my friend to get me through the working day. But for exercise also, caffeine can have a role too. But really, you kind of want to keep it simple, nothing that you don't have to chew or nothing too hard. Sometimes people will even bring bananas maybe, but I think really jelly beans, fluids, maybe electrolyte drinks or even sports drinks are probably going to be our best.
Really good options there.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's them all. I've just looked through the questions there. I don't see any more.
Good.
Covered everything in the that have come in tonight as well.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I think, you know, the main thing is really, you know, be consistent with what you do, trust what you do. If you need advice, you know, reach out to people who are working in that area and are able to help you. But, you know, keeping a food diary, keeping real food, you know, all of these things are really what we want to see people doing. And as Laura mentioned earlier, seeing how you can build in these habits, you know, that are working now, how you can build them in the future. So I think tying them in with current habits, you know, and current behavior, I suppose, is the evidence will say will work best for us to keep doing what we're doing. And, you know, I do think the really important thing when it comes to eating is there really is no need to feel you have to be perfect with your eating. You know, there are going to be days that you're great, there are going to be days that you're bad, you know, and really, or not necessarily bad, but just not the way you want it to be. And, you know, that's okay. And I think, you know, if most of the time you're eating, you know, real food, unprocessed, whole grains and proteins and lots of fruits and vegetables and drinking plenty of water, like, you're doing a good job. And so I think people are way too hard on themselves when it comes to eating and feeling a lot of pressure to be perfect with it. You know, I think really focusing on your habits around your eating, why you're eating, you know, are you eating past full, you know, and really focusing on that is potentially more important for wellness, and also important when you're embarking on this great event on the 19th of September. So thank you everybody so much. It's 8 o'clock. I don't think we have any more questions, do we, Laura? I think
no, looks good, Aoife. Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you so much. I've learned loads as well. So
oh, good. Well, and absolutely, if anyone's out there and they have nutrition questions they forgot to ask, feel free to pop me a message on Instagram too. I'm happy to share and help any people have any issues coming up to the VHI Virtual Women's Mini Marathon on the 19th of September. So best of luck, everyone. I'm looking forward to seeing all those Instagram stories and everything. And I'll do my best to make it through, but I'm not sure if I'm going to make it through this the event this year, but hopefully next year for sure. But Laura, thank you so much. It was great to chat.
Bye.
Have a great evening.
Bye. Bye.
Bye. Bye.